Evening? You alright? Did you enjoy that? Excellent. That's a good start anyway. So, I've got loads of questions. I've just been having a massive chat outside, so it's a really interesting story, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, but I thought, let's give you a bit of a background into the film, the stuff that you probably wouldn't have found out through watching it. So, Paul, just tell us about how this film came about, because actually, you know, Sleaford Mods had a bit of a profound influence on you, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I ever heard of them was probably last May, and it was tied up in knots. As most of you know, the first line, which is "the smell of piss is so strong it smells like decent bacon." So it's quite, grabs you, that lyric, doesn't it? And got into them, when Divide and Exit came out, and then I interviewed the band last October in Brighton, and Andrew mentioned that they were going to be doing this tour of places that bands don't usually necessarily go to, Scunthorpe, Barnsley, Wakefield, Colchester. And I started to think that that might make a good idea for a music documentary, but I'd never made a documentary, I'd never made any sort of film. But Nathan, who I co-made the film with, is a film student, so I asked him around about December if he fancied getting involved. He said yes. We approached the band just after Christmas, and I thought they'd probably tell us to piss off, but Jason sort of was into the idea, so by early January they approved it, so we had 6 weeks to get the money together, to plan it all. We were on tour with them by the end of February, so it all happened very quickly.
And you had a crowdfunding campaign that was set up, but I think you even yourself were surprised by, the reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, people were just really generous, both with money, but also, one of the things we wanted was people to get in touch with us that wanted to be interviewed for the film, and we had so many people just get in touch, and then they'd turn up at the gigs, and we'd meet them beforehand, in the day sometimes, or just before the gig. So it was made possible obviously by the band, but also by the fans really. And the film is for them as well, as much as it is for any new audience. It's mainly dedicated to them. Well, we've got about those 400 names.
Yeah.
Thanking them at the end of it.
Well, it's testimony in itself, isn't it? And obviously the funds kept coming in, and you were saying that you possibly under-budgeted at the start.
Yeah,
so
I mean, we're two amateurs that didn't really know what we were doing, really. It's the first time I'd ever picked up a camera, so we budgeted for £7,000, it's a decent amount of money, but that's got us around the country and bought some equipment, but then you don't think about the other things you've got to pay for, like a BBFC certification, which is the best part of £1,000, and all these other little things that we just didn't know about. So we've covered the budget now with other donations that we've had, so we'll be all right.
And what was the reaction of Sleaford Mods when you approached them? Because you sort of started out as a fan, and you didn't actually ask them straight off, did you? I guess you built that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a little bit of time with Jason after a gig in Scotland. I think he was probably intrigued, and the idea of it was about this particular moment in their history, about going to these places. And it's called the Small Towns Tour. Obviously, we came to Cardiff, we went to Liverpool. These aren't small towns; these are major cities. But it was just what the tour became known as. I mean, I think they were curious as to what we would do, but they were very hands-off. They didn't constantly, ask to have input or check up on us.
I mean, it was a bit riding on it in a sense, wasn't it? It's like you say, it's the first time you've ever made a documentary, and Sleaford Mods would have told you if they didn't like it, but thankfully they did, didn't they? They were very hands-off, but very complimentary at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all they ever said to us was they wanted to see it when it was finished, and they didn't make any changes or request any changes. We started sending them rushes once we had about 4 chapters done, and they liked it. I think their overriding sense of how they felt about it was relief, really, that it was decent, that it wasn't shit. So their manager Steve is a really lovely guy, and I think one of the best compliments we had from Steve, who isn't particularly, in my opinion, like gushing with his praise. Yeah. But he actually said to me, I haven't seen anything that I object to. And to me, that was like getting a 5-star review.
Excellent.
So,
and it strikes me that actually being on tour with Sleaford Mods would probably be quite an endurance exercise in itself, probably, in terms of the amount of alcohol you could possibly drink on a shift. So what was it like being out on the road with them?
Yeah, it was unhealthy. I think that would be the same for most bands, really. Because, you're not sleeping properly, drinking a lot, eating service station food. You just have to get on with it, don't you? Wake up and you just do. You've got no choice but to get in the car and go to the next place. So it was a great experience.
And Cardiff then, obviously you filmed in Cardiff, and
Yeah.
you know, you interviewed the unofficial queen of the music scene, Ashley Spillers.
Yeah.
So what was the Cardiff gig like? You had a bit of celebrity turn up, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I didn't get to meet him, but apparently James Dean Bradfield was there. Apparently he really into the lyrics, but I was filming, so I didn't get to see him. But obviously,
Yeah.
loved the Manics, great band.
Yeah.
And Cardiff was actually really good in terms of we interviewed about 7 people, and I think we rang. Is Ashley here? We rang her on the morning or emailed her on the morning and said, you know, can we interview you?
Yeah.
That's really unprofessional, that, but she was very gracious and said, yeah, right, when are you going to come down? And it took about 10 minutes, that's all right. They just opened up the shop, and it was a really good interview. And a couple of other people that we interviewed in Cardiff as well that made it into the film. I think it was important to have a representation of very, you know, different places in the UK, different accents, different ages. It was a shame that we didn't get up to Scotland on that tour because, you know, calling a film Invisible Britain and then not featuring Scotland is criminal. And my wife's Scottish, and I got a bit of a tough time on her over that. But we couldn't find a way to put Scotland in there without having been there. It would have seemed a bit awkward. But Cardiff was very good. It was a great gig. A few stage invaders, I think, over the barriers and stuff. So a good place.
And it meant a big step for you, doesn't it? Because, you know, you've now given up your job and you've become a filmmaker full time. So it's, you know, quite a profound effect for you personally.
Yeah, it's scary as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jason worked as a benefits advisor as well as having other previous jobs, and he only quit his job last October.
Okay.
And you know, I asked him about what that was like, and he said he missed the routine of going to. I don't miss the routine of waking up and going to work. I suppose it's scary to not have regular money coming in because I've worked all my life.
Yeah.
But you know, you just have to try and give something a go. If I didn't give this a go now, then I'd probably kick myself. So hopefully it'll work out. If not, then you can always go and get another job, can't you?
Of course. In terms of the aims of the film, then obviously it combines social commentary with, I guess, a traditional-ish overview of a phenomena, really, as Sleaford Mods have been in the last couple of years. Was that what you were aiming to get out of it, essentially? Was that your aim for the documentary?
Yeah, but very vaguely. I mean, initially it was going to be about the band and about that tour, but covering that aspect of going around the country and meeting up with people in communities that were, you know, in some way resisting austerity. We didn't exactly know who we would meet. Some of the people that we met, it was a case of having to just go out there and see what you came across. You know, certainly in Cafe Independent in Scunthorpe, that came out of that. Other people got in touch with us. The Jenga stuff, the joint enterprise, that came through our producer, Andrew Tiernan. Kathy Wood we met through one of the fans who told us about, you know, Kathy's brother, that Mark, who you know, the tragedy of his life and his death. But it was a case of, you know, going to these places and sort of turning up and sort of seeing who you'd meet and seeing what happened, really. I mean, the deindustrialisation part of it was always planned because we knew we were going to, you know, Barnsley, and we knew what happened there, so that was always part. We didn't necessarily know we were going to meet the people from Unite. That came about through one of the fans who's in the film, a guy called Sam. The class inequality bit, Lisa's actually an old friend of Jason, so that kind of came about for me sort of saying to Lisa, you know, you fancy being in the film, and talking about, you know, the issues that she covers. So we had an idea, but it all came together during the making of it. I mean, as you know, when you make a documentary, it's not like you script it you don't have actors. It's a case of you've got this footage and you make the script fit the footage.
It strikes me that the film is, you know, for all the harrowing stories that are told, and the fact that it provides quite a profound sort of social commentary, I think at the end it's quite a redemptive sort of film. You know, it does ignite your passion as well as your anger for what's going on in Britain. I mean, are you hoping, obviously, it's had a profound effect on yourself through, you know, quitting your job and becoming a filmmaker full time? Do you hope the documentary can have a similar sort of thread for other people?
Yes and no. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that, because I think once you've made something, you put it out there and it's up to other people to make of it what they will, and not sort of in this to, you know, try and, you know, spearhead anything or inspire people. I think I've been inspired by other things, but you know, I'm not arrogant enough to sort of think that that's what I'm going to do. If I did do that, if someone, you know, came up to me and said, "Oh, that was really great, and you've inspired me to do this," then I think I'd be, I don't know, I wouldn't be embarrassed, but I think it would be quite tough to sort of hear that. And what do you say? You know, it's just, I've probably said that to people in the past, and I think it's a noble thing to be inspired, but it's certainly not what I've set about to do. It was just something that we wanted to make about the country. It wasn't like a case of like, right, everybody come on, follow us, because I think you get into that mode and then it can be quite dangerous.
One more question then before we open it up. But Sleaford Mods, what is it that ignites that sort of passion and that difference as well? Because they do obviously divide opinion. What is it for you? What ignited that fire for you?
I think it's two things for me. I think it's the anger that's in it that voices that frustration, but then to go with that, the humour and the wit. Because you've seen a lot of bands that have been political that will rant and rave, but there's no humour in there, and people can often switch off to that. But what I think is good about them is there's almost that. There's a wicked truth to it that's also in some ways very sharp. The analysis, it's the language of the street in a lot of terms, and then people can relate to it because it speaks to them on their level rather than it being deliberately clever. I mean, I really like the Manics. Some of the lyrics are fantastic, from two great intellects, but might put off some people because it's often something that isn't something that you can immediately get. Yeah. I think what Sleaford Mods do is they immediately speak to people, many different people, on a level that they can immediately grasp, really.
Sure. So, anybody got any questions for Paul? I want to ask? Come on.
Thank you. Obviously, the Sleaford Mods have inspired you to make the film, and you're obviously a fan of them. Are there any other bands doing that for you at the moment, do you think, that are sort of making this difference and inspiring people to come together and, express themselves like they are and feel part of something like the Sleaford Mods are doing?
Not too many that I'm aware of. I mean, I always think that there is probably someone out there, in their bedroom right now on a laptop that will be the next person. I heard something the other day by a group called Dark Star. I don't know if you're aware of them. They've made an album where they sort of moved to Huddersfield, I think, for 18 months and just interviewed people randomly outside stations and things, and they've now put it into their own Warp Records, so you can imagine the sort of music that it is. I've only listened to it once, but I think it was really good. I think what was great about it was the concept and the idea behind it, rather than it being the delivery and the actual lyrics. But I don't really hear too much, but that's not to say it's not out there. It's just, I'm 39 and I'm not really in touch with what's going on right now, really. So hopefully there is something out there.
We had a conversation beforehand about the fact that protest music doesn't seem to exist like it did 20, 30 years ago, and there aren't those bands that seem to exist that were out there. And in a way it's quite perverse that you've got two 40-year-old men who probably got that voice and have got that righteous anger and really want to get that message across, which, I guess there's lots of reasons for that, isn't there? We were talking about the sort of, it's not actually a word, but middle classification of music that, is very difficult for people, young people from working class backgrounds to get into music nowadays, and, that's something that does cause a barrier, I guess.
Yeah, I think the problem is that, marketing has taken over the arts. I've got friends that work in publishing, and before they can sign books now, it has to go via the marketing department, like, how many will this sell? And when you're doing that, when you're sort of looking at art and putting a bottom line under it to see how many copies you're going to sell based on marketing projections, you will lose anything that is, perhaps risky or dangerous. So I think it's affected the music industry as well, really. Anything that they, can't, sort of manufacture to not just to children, but to a ready-made audience. If there's not an audience for it already, they won't take a risk on it. And a lot of political or protest music would fall into that category, I think.
Sure.
I think Ashley says in the film, unless with the music industry, people are subjected to music school graduates. It's that whole kind of Brit school thing. Yeah. And out of all of those people, you get people that are great, like Amy Winehouse, who kind of came from that background, but who was authentic, who did have a great voice. But for every Amy Winehouse, then you've got, one of those dickheads that's on X Factor that wants to be famous because they want to be famous rather than they want to make art. So
sure,
it's a problem.
Definitely. Any more? Right at the back.
Thanks very much. It's a very enjoyable film.
Thank you.
What I find shocking is that there's not many other bands like that around today. Especially perhaps South Wales working class culture and other working class cultures around the country are not producing that kind of gritty DIY band, and yet the internet seems to supposedly have this, but they're not allowed to break through that net, if you like.
No, it's a very valid point. I think hopefully with the success of of Sleaford's, you'll see maybe A&R men going out and trying to sign people, but I mean that can always go wrong, can't it? Because it happened during punk, where obviously you had the Vanguard, the Pistols, and the Clash, and Buzzcocks, and all those other bands, and then they signed a lot of second-rate acts. And same with Manchester years later, and same with Britpop, and then same with the electronic acts like Massive Attack. So I mean, there is no other band like Sleaford Mods, and they couldn't have made that film without anyone else. But you do hope that there will be someone else coming through now. And it is quite simple to do. I mean, like to buy a guitar and an amp and learn how to play is an endeavour, whereas to sort of get an iPad, because a lot of that stuff is written on iPad as well by Andrew, and then it gives it to Jason, and then he writes his lyrics. It's a lot cheaper to do. It's a lot more accessible, I think. So hopefully more of it.
Anybody else?
So just a quick question. What's are there sort of further plans to release the film?
What are your plans in terms of like communicating the film elsewhere? Like, is it going to be on, excuse me if this sounds offensive, like Netflix? I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
That's a good question.
I work with like a section of society. Like some of the things that come across this would be utterly alien, and it'd be quite interesting to kind of know how I could, tell people about the film and where they could access it.
Yeah, I mean, it's on here for another week if you want to get them down next week. But it'll be out on DVD. I mean, the first priority for us is to get it to the people that crowdfunded it before Christmas on DVD. That's why Nathan isn't here, because he's had to do something with the menu, something technical that I don't understand. But it'll be on DVD. I mean, it will perhaps go to things like Netflix. I mean, we had one guy that got in touch with us from a company called Dogwoof that put out really good documentaries. And I'd sent him the film a while back, and he hadn't got around to watching it. And I was on a train, and he said, "I've just watched the film. It's fucking great, but I'm too late, aren't I?" And he was too late. We'd already put it out. But then he's been trying to get us a TV deal. So he approached the BBC, and they said no. He approached Channel 4, who said it was too political. Channel 4, and it's now with Sky Arts, which I don't hold out very much hope for, given who owns Sky. But it might go to Netflix. I mean, we're not in this for the money. We want to get it seen by as many people as possible. And if it doesn't go on some sort of video on demand service, we've made the budget back. We've made a few quid for ourselves. I wouldn't rule out putting it on YouTube for free or for a quid or something and just getting it out that way. The main thing is that it's seen, and it needs to be seen fairly soon. I mean, we were offered a deal by a production company to put it out, but they said, you've got to wait till first quarter, which I didn't even know what that meant. But that means between January and March.
Yeah.
So we couldn't wait really. I mean, it's a very prescient film to put out. I mean, putting it out, in March, it wouldn't have necessarily have meant as much. I mean, joint enterprise is something that people need to know about now, and all of the other themes as well. So it might come to Netflix. Who knows? It would certainly be out of place, but I think that's a good thing. There's so much shit on Netflix, isn't there? You want to see stuff like that on there amongst all of the tacky American shows.
Definitely. Anybody else? Alfred again.
Yeah, I think it was a really well put together documentary, considering it's your first time.
Cheers.
Yeah, really blown away. Can I ask what you're working on next? Any ideas in the back?
Yeah, I'm hopefully going to be doing a documentary on the subject of veterans in two areas, one homelessness and one the number of veterans that are in the prison population. There's a statistic that I read about, which was that 1 in 9 people in this country that are homeless are ex-military. It's higher in cities. In London, I think it's 1 in 4. So the plan is to make a documentary about that, the reasons why, and working with a couple of veterans, whether they're homeless, to just sort of, hold up, a camera to it and just try and ask those questions, why this sort of thing happens. And hopefully, if we don't know who we're going to be working with yet. It could be that you work with someone that's currently homeless to try and help them through that, with something they want to do. We certainly don't want to make something that's just, voyeuristic and just pointing a camera at something. There's a documentary called Dark Days, which was by, I think, a British filmmaker, and he went over to New York and he lived with some homeless people in New York. I don't know if he lived with them, but he followed them quite closely, and it's a very powerful film if you can see it. I don't think we're going to make that, but it will certainly be something that would involve working with some homeless people that are ex-military to help them with something they wanted to do, whatever that was. I mean, if they wanted to sort of, find a job, then, you know, if we could help in some way by being filmmakers, then great. I don't know, but that's the plan to do next anyway.
And that's quite a bit more of a challenge for you, I guess, isn't it? Because it also carries some quite unsavoury, possibly right-wing influence on it.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be hijacked by EDL or Britain's First or
Certainly
people
not.
like that, you know, which could be, because I guess they tend to jump on that subject quite heavily.
They love all that propaganda, don't they? So yeah, we wouldn't want them involved. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sure. Everybody else?
I just wondered how you're obviously clearly very politicised and you know, kind of passionate about the subject matter. So more broadly in terms of politics, are you kind of optimistic or are you pessimistic with regards to, if not what's going on now, certainly for the future?
In this country, to do with the Labour Party or with politics in general, or?
Yeah, well, all the above, but I mean, this country maybe in particular.
Yeah, I'd say I'm optimistic about what people can do in communities, as the film shows. You know, if you want to make a difference, then get involved in a project within your community, whether it's something like a Cafe Independent, which is, you know, to try and deal with the fact that the steelworks there are in trouble, or whether it's some form of protest. You know, in terms of the wider picture of mainstream politics, it does look pretty bleak. You know, it looks difficult for Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's a very decent politician and a good bloke, but within that party, you know, it's kind of open warfare against him. So I don't think he's the answer. I think he's got a mandate from the people that voted for him, the Labour Party members, but whether he survives to, you know, bring that to government, I don't know. I mean, would he even win an election? You think the way that the media have gone after him, you haven't seen nothing yet. You wait till it gets to, you know, if he lasts, you wait till it gets to 2020 and it will be, yeah. But I'm optimistic about individuals, not about the wider political picture then.
I think the one thing that I took from the film myself was the sort of devolution to the regions, or democratising the regions, that independent groups doing great stuff that maybe you don't know about, that can inspire and act as templates for other people to do similar things, which is the power of filmmaking, but also the internet, I guess, to get those messages across. Because I think at the minute, you know, given the vote in the comments the other night, there seems to be a general sense of helplessness about what's happening in society, and especially in politics, to be able to influence it in any way. And, you know, we were talking beforehand, weren't we, of actually just doing little things to try and make a difference to just your group, your community. And I guess the people that you interviewed strongly held that belief, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we were fortunate that we met people that obviously were into the band, but then were also interested in their environment, and were aware that, you know, you could do things to protest. I mean, I think the danger is that we live in a culture now with social media, which is a good force. I think it's got a lot of positives about it, but you see when something happens like the tragedy in Paris, and people will change their Facebook picture to be a French flag, thinking that that's doing something. And, you know, no offence to anyone that does that, but that's going to do fuck all, is it really? It's not really doing anything. You're showing solidarity on one hand, but, you know, it's not really enough. And I think signing petitions is good as well, you know, but at the end of the day, it's that you're at the end of a keyboard. I think marching is very important, and I think just doing your bit in your community, whatever that is. If you find a cause or a campaign you can be involved in, you give up your time, then that's what matters, really.
Cool. Anybody else?
In relation to the film then, did you have a target market that you were aiming at? Because in an opinion, would that be able to be shown to disillusioned youth, or was that aimed at disillusioned 40-somethings?
Good question. It was aimed at anyone that would watch it. I mean, we didn't think that far ahead. Someone contacted us and said, actually she contacted us and I said, "Are you up for an interview?" And she said, "I don't think I'm in your demographic." And we didn't have a demographic, you know. She was a woman that was in her 50s, you know, from Wakefield, and we didn't have a demographic, and we didn't have a target audience as such. I mean, I knew the audience would be the band's fans, but we were approached by a teacher from a school in Nottingham, and he said he'd like to show it in his school, so I was quite surprised at that, but, you know, he got to basically had to get this form signed by the parents consenting to see a film that has, you know, the word cunt in it about 12 times, and the parents all signed off on it, which was great. I think I'm going to get that little thing framed and put it on my wall. So they went down really well with those people, and they were, you know, children from the age of 14 up to 16. 100 of them attended a Q&A that I did in the school one Thursday afternoon. So I think it has got a broader appeal, and the band have a broader appeal than just, you know, the 40, 50 something ex-punk brigade. You know, what they're saying is a lot of the music, especially on the new album, is, I think, veering in towards, you know, more along the electronic line. Some of it's a bit kind of streets-esque as well. So yeah, hopefully it will spread wider than the initial audience, because the initial audience was kind of a lot of people that were like reading The Wire and that sort of thing. It was a very small minority of people that were into it, but I think it's good enough and it's broad enough to spread out.
Talking about that at the school, you were saying, weren't you, that I asked Paul, what's the best question you've been asked? So I thought I could sneakily put in myself, but it was at the school, wasn't it?
Mm.
So just tell us what...
Yeah, this young lad, I've forgotten his name, but he said, you know, you're talking in the film about how mainstream media manipulates the truth, and he said to me, as someone that now works in the media, have you ever manipulated the truth? And I said, well, you know, maybe not manipulated the truth, but maybe I haven't given full disclosure. And then he just left it there, because I didn't have, you know, I wasn't going to tell him. He didn't grill me any further, yeah.
Cool. Anybody else? Right at the back.
Oh no, sorry, last question.
Oh,
sorry,
no,
we got
no
people
worries.
waiting for the next film.
All right. So ultimately, you've got all of these to do. The band, where do you see the band going? Do you think they're just going to be, these last couple of years with Sleaford Mods years, and these sort of, you know, discriminating almost nature of the music industry as it can be, pick people up and put them down on a whim? Do you think they've got their chops to last?
I do, yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're going to be doing next in terms of what it's going to sound like. I mean, I think each album, as they've developed, sounds, you know, similar but different in some way. I think they'll always have a low audience. I think, you know, like you look at bands like The Fall, they've got that hardcore people that just buy anything that they do and go to any gig. I think they can get better and better. I've seen them, you know, 25, 26 times, and it does get better and better and better. And obviously I'm a fan, so I'm going to say that, but seeing the level of the performance, seeing Jason develop as a front man, you know, he gets stronger all the time. You know, Andrew's, you know, knocking back, you know, the beers and dancing, and he's always doing his thing, but his understanding of music, I think, is phenomenal, and I think that certainly there's a lot of music left in them, and hopefully they go on and just, you know, get bigger and more people hear them.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on
Thank
making
you.
a fantastic documentary, and as has been said, especially for your first effort, good luck with your next documentary. Can we have a round of applause?